Good Monday, everybody, and welcome to Charting with Dan. I'm Dan Murrell. Joining me this week, Lon Harris. Lon, thank you so much.
Always happy to be here. Love the charts.
Happy to have you with me, and we are talking about, of course, Captain Marvel, the biggest box office story, not only here in the United States and in North America, but worldwide this weekend. Blew past the expectations that people thought it was going to do.
Sure.
Ended up being #1 around the world. There's so many different aspects and facets and parts of the numbers that we can look at. It's one of my dream weekends, Lon.
Yeah.
I can look at so many different elements of it. Let's just dive right into it. Let's look at the top 5 for the weekend. Domestically here in North America, Captain Marvel, #1, $153 million. Lon, we talked last week about expectations. The high end of tracking and projection, even a couple of days before the movie came out, was 120 to 140.
100
it went past
to
even
120, I think, was where all the projections were that week. I said 85 on this show last week. I feel like a little bit of a doofus now. I did not realize the level of excitement there was out there for this movie. Obviously, with these kind of numbers,
excitement and enthusiasm. There was all the talk last week, and as we sat here, the reviews had not been out. They weren't out yet. Then they came out. They were, from critics, were positive but not glowing, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed to positive sort of take on this one. It wasn't like Black Panther where it was universal acclaim.
Right. But so going into the weekend, I think there were some legitimate question marks about what it would do. And once it came out, the audience, we'll look at this, the numbers for the cinema score. It got an A cinema score. Audiences seemed to largely like it. There's a lot of other factors that we'll discuss in a minute. Excuse me, I have something in my eye. There we go. That was the BS from last week, escaping my body. But when it came out, it turned out that this was a film that audiences were enthusiastic about. It had good preview numbers. It had a good Saturday. It had a good weekend. It held well over the weekend. And we're going to look and see what it does as it goes forward. But let's just dive right into the film, where it ranks, everything else. Overall, if you're talking the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain Marvel was the 7th best opening weekend in the franchise, now 21 films deep. But let's look at, if you're looking at solo movies, so these are films, not the movie Solo Marvel films. Let's take a look at where Captain Marvel ranks there. It ranked 4 behind Black Panther. Now, some people would say Captain America Civil War, that's not a solo movie. Well, it's got a solo. It's part of the Captain America trilogy. Technically, I'm going by the rule of the law, not the spirit of the law.
That's Cap 3.
That's Cap 3. So Black Panther, Captain America Civil War, Iron Man 3, Iron Man 2. Obviously, Civil War and the 2 Iron Mans, both early summer, first weekend in May releases. Black Panther, phenomenal success last February. So now with Captain Marvel, we have another film that's succeeding for them outside of the summer window. And I think that's something that we're going to return to as we talk about the performance of the movie here is the way that they're breaking out in different areas, release date, worldwide versus domestic, stuff like that. Is a Marvel film is not just confined to one time a year. It is just about every month of the year at this point.
It's also fascinating to look at that list of 5. It's 3 movies that are either one of the launch characters or that have a lot of the original characters from the franchise that launched it, but then 2 real outliers of new characters that Marvel is managing to get people excited about, all on their own without necessarily leaning on the franchise.
And it should be noted that Captain Marvel, even of those 5, is the only film in which a character debuted in the film. Black Panther,
he was in Civil War first.
Right. The rest of them were sequels to other films. So the top debut for a character in the MCU. But at the same time, there are not that many debut films in the sense that with Spider-Man and with Black Panther, they've started weaving their characters into films before their solo movies, as opposed to just starting off. Doctor Strange, obviously, Ant-Man. You still have some of those characters that get debut in their own movies, but they're also starting to mix characters in before you get to
trade them off, right?
Yeah,
because I mean, this did have Nick Fury in it as part of the sort of selling point.
Yeah, exactly. So, Lon, there were a few notable kind of historical things that Captain Marvel did. We'll talk about some of them. This one is it's a domestic and a worldwide record, but we're going to look at this one through the lens domestically, and then we're going to look at another one on a more global perspective. But let's look at this domestically, which is that the record was broken this weekend, both domestically and globally, for the top debut weekend opening from a female director. Anna Boden obviously co-directed this film. That sets a new record for opening weekends domestically and globally, but these are the domestic numbers for a movie with a female director, followed by Shrek 2. Kelly Asbury was a co-director on that film, Patty Jenkins by Wonder Woman, Lily and Lana Wachowski with The Matrix Reloaded, and then Sam Taylor Johnson in the first 50 Shades of Grey film.
Interesting.
So number one, and by a pretty large margin without adjusting for inflation. A lot of talk around, obviously, the history of having a female character lead an MCU film, and the records that Brie Larson being in the lead role set. But I think also a great step and a great record-making weekend for female directors.
Sure. And I mean, again, looking at that list, it's famous, well-known IP, it's sequels, it's a book that was a bestseller, and then you've got Captain Marvel, which is not that well-known of a character. I mean, it's really insane to me how the MCU itself as a franchise has built in this level of dedication and confidence from people that they can throw out a relatively unknown character and still everybody's like, I gotta see this so I can keep following this overarching narrative. It's why everybody else is trying and failing with shared universes.
Well, and it's also a question of one that goes back to Guardians of the Galaxy, which was, I think, really the first, while Thor definitely was not a slam dunk, nor Iron Man.
No.
These were at least characters that maybe not the man on the street knew, but somebody that read Marvel Comics knew who these characters were. Guardians of the Galaxy was the first time, and there was the same kind of trepidation around that film before it came out. Is it going to work? Nobody knows who these characters
Groot,
are.
It's a tree and a raccoon. Yeah.
And that, I think that was one of the first times that the Marvel brand name sort of broke out, where people said, like, well, I'll give it a chance because
it's
a
part
Marvel
of
film.
this group of films that I'm already familiar with, and I like those.
Yeah, and now Captain Marvel, you have a character that's never appeared in anything before, and you look at these weekend numbers, which surpasses Guardians of the Galaxy and so many of the other ones. Yeah. Pretty impressive. It's no surprise that Captain Marvel also had the top per screen number of the weekend on just over 4,000 screens, $35,599 per screen. That's not too bad, Lon. On 4,000 screens.
Solid, yeah.
That's nice if you're an independent film in March and you're opening on 5 screens.
It's considering we had, I mean, every movie theater in America, it felt like, was showing at least on one screen Captain Marvel.
I think if we did the numbers, it's probably true. And the theaters that weren't, I think, lost out on some money this weekend.
If you were still showing Greta this weekend, I don't know. Maybe not the best call.
Maybe not the best call. But Lon, this movie wasn't just playing in America. It was also playing worldwide, where it even further surpassed what the expectations were for its first weekend. Let's look at the top 5 movies of the weekend worldwide. Captain Marvel banked, including North America and all overseas territories, almost, Lon, $500 million in its first weekend, $456 million.
That's a lot of money.
$400 million more than number 2, which is How to Train Your Dragon, followed by Green Book.
Green Book, still chugging
along. Lita, Battle Angel, and Medea, Family Funeral, which is largely fueled by its second weekend here in North America.
Yeah, that's not going to travel.
And I think for me, this is another, along with the barriers that were broken, records that were set for female directors, female stars, this is another thing that I think is really interesting about what Captain Marvel did this weekend, which is that it was more successful overseas even than it was here in North America. And the way that Marvel has grown its brand and built its brand, not just in the United States, but worldwide, when you see a character like Captain Marvel, which is not an Avengers film, which is not a culmination, it's not a team-up film, it's not, several sequels feeding into one movie. This is an origin story. This is the first time you're seeing this character. Marvel now has the clout and the status worldwide to open a film at this size and at this proportion. And just to put things in perspective, I wanted to look at, these are the top 5 opening weekends of all time. If you take North America out of the picture and just look at what we call overseas territories, but basically the entire world minus North America, Captain Marvel was the 5th highest opening weekend of all time. If you take North America out of it, it was 6th highest worldwide, but just getting rid of the North American numbers. And look, I mean, these are the films that it joined. These are billion-plus-dollar hits.
Right. Well, and they're culminations, just like you were saying. It's the 8th Fast and Furious. It's Infinity War.
Yeah.
It's Jurassic World, which is the revival of this huge franchise. And then the last Harry Potter film. It's the first one that is really launching a brand new direction for a franchise.
Right. And I think as we're looking at the future of Marvel and not just what's going to happen with Endgame, but when you go beyond Endgame, the fact that they're able to take a property that is certainly not very well known in the United States, but even less well known across the world, I would say, to launch it at such a number that it's holding its own with these huge 6th, 7th, 8th, 19th, 20th films in these series or reboots of classic series. Again, I think that just goes to show you the power that they are building to make it a sustainable global box office.
It makes me wonder, because a lot of what we're hearing right now are that the WB's plan with DC, and even some of the talk about what Feige may be thinking for Phase 4, is to sort of get away from the shared universe, which makes it so complicated to continue developing.
Yeah.
It's what DC is doing, like do a Shazam, do a Birds of Prey, do a Suicide Squad 2, sort of think of them as their own franchise. This is kind of a strong counter argument to that. Like, if you can pull off the shared film universe and make a franchise feel like every new edition is a part of a larger story, you can really drive people to the theater, like the first weekend.
And this, the way, now that we sort of have a metric as to how the market responds to a character like Captain Marvel, who's part of a bigger universe but they haven't seen before on film, this makes me even more. Shazam has been tied to Captain Marvel for a lot of reasons, but here's the way that here's the way that I am choosing to look at them is, it comes out in a few weeks, and I am very anxious to see how it does, because in a way it's in not very much, but in a similar position where you have a larger cinematic universe, but here's a character that is connected to it, that is tied to it, that will potentially have a large part in the future of it, but is in itself an introduction to this character. We haven't met anyone really associated with this film before. And I'm very fascinated to look and see how it compares to Aquaman, which was another solo movie, but directly tied to of previous films. He's appeared in previous films. And I think in a weird way, Shazam is in a similar position in that for the DC universe, it is trying a new franchise that's related but not directly tied to the main franchise yet. May not even have a quote-unquote main franchise that it's going to tie into. I guess that's a big difference.
We will see.
But how it performs compared to Captain Marvel.
And I mean, similar characters in that, not just that they once shared a name, but that they're at a similar, like, if you're a comic book fan, if you follow Marvel Comics or DC Comics, you probably know these characters. Otherwise, you probably don't know these characters. Like, Shazam has not had a lot of breakout beyond being a DC fan.
Right.
At this point.
I read Superman and Batman, and those are my favorite superheroes growing up. And even I didn't have I have a functional knowledge of Shazam, but I didn't know the full lore of the character.
It's a lot of the animated films integrate, Billy Batson, whatever. But not so much the sort of casual fan on the street isn't really going to know Captain Marvel or Shazam. So kind of comparable in that way. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see how the market responds.
Yeah,
I guess.
Definitely. Lon, we talked about the female directors and the history that was made there. There was another little bit of history that was made this weekend, and that concerned movies with a female that received top billing. Right. There have been a lot of movies, certainly The Force Awakens being one of them, and The Last Jedi with Daisy Ridley, where certainly the new lead protagonist is a female, but even in those films, Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill getting the top billing, the top lead. When I say top billing, like you are the first name on the poster, you are the character, you are what the movie is about. Captain Marvel made some history there. Let's take a look at that. These are global openings, so these are worldwide openings, but Captain Marvel set a record. It was the biggest opening globally ever of a film with a female that received top billing. Captain Marvel, number one. Followed by, and I mean, look at the gap, $100 million gap, followed by 2017's Beauty and the Beast. Twilight, Breaking Dawn Parts 1 and 2, and I didn't even know this because you think of them as so linked as a couple, but Kristen Stewart got first billing in that series, followed by Robert Pattinson. So those two Twilight films would chart there. And then Rogue One with Felicity Jones getting top billing in that film. But that is, I think, really impressive to look at, to see one film has set a record for not just a debut from a female director, but a debut from a female star, if you're looking globally. That's
and
pretty
again,
impressive.
the only one that's kind of launching a new character that people don't already know. The others are a remake of a beloved, very popular animated film, 2 films that are part of a franchise based on a very popular best-selling book, and then a Star Wars movie.
Although I would argue that Rogue One, a little bit more. I would say that Rogue One is as connected to the Star Wars universe as Captain Marvel is connected to the MCU.
I guess. I mean,
it's a new story.
Fair.
It's a new setting. It's a different time.
It just feels like there's fewer Star Wars movies still, maybe not now, but as of Rogue One, was still a little rarer.
Yeah.
Now they're kind of going at it.
Yeah, but I think they're both sort of
fair,
spin off, splinter cells to the continuity that you know. Lon, there's a lot of stats that I could go over, so I just decided to just throw them all on one sheet, just to put in perspective how Captain Marvel did in the bigger picture. The number 18 domestic opening weekend of all time, number six worldwide opening weekend of all time ever.
That's astounding.
The 3rd best domestic opening for a female in top billing. So we talked about it's the best global debut, 3rd best domestically, the 7th highest domestic MCU opening weekend, the second highest opening weekend for an MCU movie worldwide ever. So it's Infinity War and this for the biggest worldwide debut for any film in the MCU. The 21st straight number 1 opening for the MCU domestically, one of 7 MCU movies to open over $150 million. It is the 16th MCU film to score an A or higher on CinemaScore. Lon, there's only one film that's gotten below an A-. It got a B+ when it was released. It's a little trivia. Which film do you think it is? The only MCU movie to not get an A+, A, or A-.
I'm going to go with Thor: The Dark World.
You're very close. It's Thor.
The original
Thor got a B+. It's the only MCU film to not get below an A- on the CinemaScore. Which is that's weird. I would not have picked that. I would have said Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah, well, I really like that first one because that Hemsworth, it so immediately connects to that character. It's really fun, but at the same time, it is a little anticlimactic, that first Thor film.
Yeah.
It's a little like the town gets roughed up a little, and then you're kind of out of there.
Well, they only had enough budget to do 3 square blocks. We weren't at Sokovia yet, Lon.
Yeah, not quite.
You had to do some legwork there. Career high openings for Brie Larson, Jude Law, and Annette Bening.
Wow.
Easily, by far. Yeah. They all have distinguished careers, but most of them haven't operated in a film at quite this scale before. And then, as we mentioned, the best weekend ever for a female director, Anna Boden. That is both domestically and globally. So a lot of notable stats, a lot of notable records and figures.
Higher, further, faster.
And again, I think that the thing that's impressive is so often we talk about a film that underperformed expectations, that it's not so often that we find a film that overperformed expectations.
And on this level, I mean, not just overperformed, but massively.
Yeah, but particularly on the global sense. And I think for me, that's the story. I mean, I think it's fantastic that it did as well as it did here domestically. But for it to do as well as it did globally, even more, I think, shows you what the value that you have when you're a Marvel and a Disney and you can launch a worldwide hit like Avengers Infinity War. These are the rewards that you reap, which is the deeper penetration you get with the audience worldwide, the more you're going to fuel those grosses when you put out sequels, prequels, spin-offs.
And there was always this sort of conventional wisdom, I guess up until maybe Wonder Woman, that, you needed guys, prominent male actors in these big action movies to sell it overseas. That
even quote-unquote stars. Not that Brie Larson is not a star, but as you said, it used to be you need The Rock.
You need a Will Smith level guy to sort of jump off these big action movies and the CW was always not necessarily for Americans, but for overseas. And so this is kind of the final nail in that coffin. It's like, if you've sold people on the franchise in the world, you can have a lot of different diversity in terms of your casting, directing, all the other elements, and people will still turn out to go see it.
Yeah. Lon, there was one other component to the box office that I want to touch on, just because it was linked to Captain Marvel, which is, if you look at the top 5 for this weekend, Alita: Battle Angel was in the number 5 spot. looking at the top 10 percentage-wise, it had the biggest drop of any movie in the top 10 week over week.
Not that surprising. It's kind of aiming for the same sort of audience.
Right. And any other week, that wouldn't be that notable. It's been in theaters, I think, for 4 weeks at this point. And this is the time when a movie like that starts to fade and maybe drop in bigger percentages. The reason I bring it up is because there was online this concerted effort to sort of encourage people, I'll say encourage, not to go see Captain Marvel and to go see Alita because, well, for any number of reasons. It started with, and certainly Roth and I found this out because we were not particularly fans of Alita, and we found that this was a film that really inspired a lot of passion that for people that knew Alita, the fans of the material already were very passionately in favor of the film, and then a lot of the people that went to see it that didn't know Alita really like the movie, and trust me, we heard about it from. I'm still hearing about it, and I understand it. Well, I understand it, and I get it.
It happens a lot when a movie really connects with a niche audience, and not necessarily with critics. They begin to feel like there was some sort of thing against the movie, and that now it's incumbent on the fans to sort of promote it widely and let people know.
Well, that was a narrative that took hold, is that the critics, for whatever reason, had something against Alita.
Right.
And then as time went on, it sort of became a backlash against Captain Marvel because, I mean, listen, there was a lot floating around about it. There were some statements that Brie Larson made that certainly angered some people. I will say, because we heard this, and the bigger point being that if you were in this space, the internet movie space, for the last 2 weeks, this was all you heard about. In any discussion about this film, 80% of the discourse was about Brie Larson or the Alita Challenge and going to see. I cannot tell you how many comments and tweets and everything else I saw about the Alita Challenge.
And it got very far away from being about the movies. It became sort of a culture war clash.
Right. And a lot of it was around statements that, listen, I had statements that Brie Larson made that were quoted back to me as reasons why they were not going to see Captain Marvel, or that I shouldn't, that I researched and found were nowhere near any statement that had ever been made by anybody ever. Just 17 times removed from another statement that caused controversy a year ago.
Right.
There was so much tied up with this film that there was this Alita Challenge was birthed, and really what it was meant to do was initially to just inspire people to go and see Alita because they felt that this was a more deserving female quote unquote superhero film. But as time went on, to as an act of defiance to go see Alita instead of Captain Marvel, and there were some, I'll call them provocateurs, who then decided to get in on the game because attention is the currency of the realm, largely. It's the coin of the realm, and I feel like there's a lot of, if you pit people against each other and put yourself at the center of it, then you all of a sudden wield a lot of influence and power. And so I think a lot of times when people see something like this, they will want to jump in and be the ringleader of that, because now they're at the center of this. So I think that this was sort of co-opted by some people that didn't necessarily give a crap about Captain Marvel or Alita or anything else. They just saw an opportunity to grab a group of people and throw them at another group of people and profit from it.
Some of these communities, I won't name any names. Some of these communities, they're pretty small, and they spend a lot of time talking with one another. And sometimes there are cultural moments that come along that a lot of people are paying attention to. And if you're desperate for oxygen and attention, that's your chance. Like, I can insert our cause into this larger conversation that everyone's having, and that's really your chance to recruit new people, get more attention. It's that rare opportunity to, like, break out and share your message with the world. And I think Captain Marvel became, for whatever reason, a lightning rod for that kind of attention.
Well, I can name a reason, but I think it's pretty clear. But
we don't need to get into it.
Exactly. My larger point being that there are people with legitimate grievances about the film that had issues with, and I'm one of them, by the way.
No,
I did not. If I did not recommend the film, I certainly thought there were a lot of things to like about the film. There were a lot of things that I didn't particularly care for about the film, and that's fine.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people out there that this film just wasn't for them, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing at all wrong with that. But I think the larger point being, and even bringing this up, is even myself, I work in this space. I've done it I've worked in this space for over 6 years now, and even I got sort of overwhelmed by the volume and the mass of this talk around it, and then to see that ultimately in the end, it was either a group that was small enough to really have no consequential impact on the box office results of either Captain Marvel or Alita, or spent, and I'm not talking about people that didn't like the movie. I'm talking about the people, and they're out there, and you know who they are because you've seen them online too. The people that devoted weeks, even months of their lives to tearing down this movie before they'd seen it.
Sure.
Before anyone had seen it. Before anyone had seen a trailer, the idea of it.
Right.
To tearing down this movie, tearing down the idea of it, and then once they found an alternative that they thought would suit, telling people to go to it. Even I got taken in by it to the point where I was looking at the results and saying, like, I wonder if Alita is going to have a bump. Like, maybe this is a big enough groundswell that it could. I didn't think it was going to be number one. Like, maybe it only drops 20 or 30%. Maybe that either it was so small that it didn't make a difference, or these were folks that talked for months and took no action whatsoever when it came time to do it.
I think it's probably a little bit of both columns. I think, I mean, to me, when you spend as much time online as we do, and when that is part of baked into your job, I think it can be very easy to make that kind of error of thinking that, well, the talk that I'm seeing so much, that's a microcosm for the world.
Yeah.
And this is a helpful reminder that not necessarily. You're
Right.
seeing a very limited sort of view just looking at Twitter or looking at the movie nerd web.
Yeah.
And there's a whole world out there of people, most of whom don't even know
Yeah.
what's being discussed. I think Green Book, we had a similar conversation where if you spend a lot of time talking with movie nerds on Twitter, you had a very specific idea of Green Book and its quality and what it's all about.
Right.
The wider world doesn't know anything about that.
Right.
Most of the, like it's a beloved, popular movie for 90% of people who have experienced it.
Yeah. And for me, I guess the major lesson that I learned from all of it is, because I sort of allowed this whole thing to affect my enjoyment of not the film itself, but certainly the experience around the release of it. It just got to be very frustrating for me personally because it just was so toxic in large places.
Yeah.
More people I saw in our comments than almost any other movie just spewing all kinds of things and not well-reasoned criticisms about a film.
No.
But again, just a repetition of 3 or 4 talking points that had been determined a long time ago. I think the important thing to remember as a movie fan, and what I'm going to try to learn, is while it seems like these kind of things when they bubble up are reality and are the world, they're not.
Yeah.
And the majority of people went and saw this like any other film. A lot of them liked it. The cinema score was an A. These were people, this was not user scores on a website. These were people that went to a film, that bought the ticket, that filled out a survey in the theater after they saw the movie.
Right.
And a large number of them really, really enjoyed it. And a large number of people, trust me, I heard from them too after our spoiler review, liked the movie because they didn't like a lot of our criticisms about it. But it's this idea that I'm going to try to take away from this, which is to keep things in perspective, take a break sometimes, realize that there's a larger world out there, and that these flashpoints are largely jumped upon because they are an opportunity to set groups of people against each other. And that's not what we want. That's not what I want. I don't. People shouldn't compete over movies. Every movie is for somebody, and it's going to not be for somebody, and that's fine. And when I say it's for somebody, I don't mean it in the way that a lot of people were tweeting me that they said Captain Marvel. Somebody said that it was for somebody in that way. No, not in that way. Movies connect to you in different ways. Movies connect to people in different ways, and it will connect to you or it won't connect to you. And you know what? It might not connect with you, but it's going to connect with that person next to you. And when you try to police that and tell people why they should or shouldn't like something or should or shouldn't hate something, particularly when it's couched in just garbage, it's not productive and it's not helpful. So I'm going to take that away from this experience, which is fans of Alita are perfectly reasonable to like that film and should like that film, and if they like them, that's great. And fans of Captain Marvel should like Captain Marvel, and
it's totally possible to enjoy both.
Oh, you
Captain
can enjoy
Marvel
both?
and Alita.
You can enjoy neither of them.
Or
but this
neither.
idea of
Yeah.
like picking and choosing, you can only like one thing. It's really destructive. And I would just say that if you're getting discouraged as I was, about this film. Just remember that that's not reality. It's just that we live in a weird world, a weird warped world, and sometimes these things bubble up and they seem like that's all there is, and it's not.
It's also a vicious cycle as the environment becomes more toxic and as the arguments become more heated. A lot of the reasonable people who just have opinions, they abandon it.
They leave.
And they leave it to just the angry, fired up people. And then so that makes it worse and worse, and the conversation degrades and degrades and degrades. And I think that's what was happening a lot, is the people who were just, I'm going to go see Captain Marvel. Like they're not even taking part in those discussions.
So
they're just going to go to the theater on Saturday and check it out.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a lesson in perspective for me. This whole experience. Lon, let's get some perspective on the box office. That's an okay segue, right?
Yeah, we're charting.
This is the 2019 domestic box office. Captain Marvel jumps to number one.
Number one
movie of the year domestically on its first weekend, jumping over How to Train Your Dragon. How to Train Your Dragon, by the way, jumped over Glass and The Upside. It's now the number 2 movie of the year here in the U.S. Lego Movie 2.
Broly.
Yeah, Broly.
Sorry,
Unfortunately,
Broly.
Dragon Ball Super Broly, one of our first big surprises of the year, knocked off the top 10 list along with A Dog's Way Home. Medea's on there at number 9. Lego Movie 2 is still going to struggle. It's going to crawl its way over $100 million. But
under the upside.
That's another big surprise of 2019 is just how much that movie underperformed with audiences.
Didn't hold people's interest.
Didn't really care about it that much. Let's look worldwide at the box office. Wandering Earth is still number 1, but number 2, Captain Marvel. That's going to be over $500 million in the matter of days, followed by How to Train Your Dragon. How to Train Your Dragon, as we saw earlier, the number 2 movie in the world over the past weekend. It's held well in the countries that it's opened in. It's nearing that. We talked about both Alita and How to Train Your Dragon 3, wanting to get around that $500 million mark. How to Train Your Dragon 3 is making good progress toward that. Alita, though, we're going to have to watch. It's not had the longevity, certainly domestically, that I think they would have wanted. It's not had the longevity in China that certainly it needed to compare readily or favorably to Ready Player One, which was a very similar film as far as budget goes. So Alita, the prospects for a sequel and what it needs to really kind of break out, it's still got some work to do, and it looks to be
tough
running
now
out of
with
gas
Captain
a little
Marvel
bit. But
nipping at its
who
heels.
knows? Depending on how VOD and home release and stuff goes, it may squeak out just enough to get a sequel. We'll see. But it's not a slam dunk, and it doesn't look like it doesn't seem like it's going to get to that $500 million mark, which would have been where I think almost the minimum level where they would have wanted it to go. Crazy Alien in there at number 6, a Chinese film, and then Pegasus Glass, Lego Movie 2, Escape Room, Extreme Job, all bumped down one spot. And then The Upside, doing well in the U.S. and really doing well worldwide, just jumps off the top 10.
Right. That's a lot to ask.
Yeah, that's a lot to ask. So, Lon, Captain Marvel is going to be number 1 again this week at the box office.
Yeah.
But there's 3 films that are going to jump into the marketplace to try to jockey for position. You have Wonder Park, which is an animated film. You have 5 Feet Apart, teen romance.
I don't know that one.
Oh yeah, it's sort of like what was that movie? Everything,
Sure.
where the girl was in a house
in a
and
bubble or something.
It's similar to that, but they have to stay 6 feet apart.
Oh,
so
5 feet apart.
Well, no, it's 6 feet, but then I don't want to give away. 5 feet apart it's a leap of faith. One. And then Captive State, which is a sci-fi film by Rupert Wyatt, whose last film was Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Many years ago.
Took a few years off.
He's back with Captive State. Those are the 3 films that'll be competing with Captain Marvel. They won't beat Captain Marvel, but they'll be competing with Captain Marvel. Lon, it's been a crazy journey.
Wow, what a week!
I hope you don't mind our little journey into the heart of darkness there toward the end. But I think it needed to be said because that wasn't certainly an element. And when you look at the numbers, a box office element about this, it was
definitely on everybody's mind going into the weekend. Yeah,
what a lot of people thought about, and most people watching probably never heard of the Alita Challenge, which is fine. That's fine.
You're better off.
I don't begrudge Alita. I hope. There's so many fans of the movie. I hope they get a sequel, and I hope it's better than the first one. I hope I like it more.
Here in the real world, we all realize that there is no competition. I mean, there's competition in the way that people are going to a box office and they're going to decide to buy tickets for one or the other. But these 2 films are not battling it out for anything. They were made totally independently of one another by people who probably weren't even aware of the other one.
Well, here's what I don't understand was it was marketed as sticking it to Disney.
Right.
stick it to Disney and go see Alita. Alita is made by 20th Century Fox.
It's going to be Disney's
you know
in like
who's
3
going to own
weeks.
20th Century Fox in like 2 weeks? The money's going to Disney either way. I hate to say it. That's a whole other issue, and that I can engage you about.
Yeah,
the
I mean,
fact that no matter what
always-
movie you go to see, it's going to Disney. That is a legitimate issue to talk about.
Always with these entertainment industry rivalries,
Yeah.
even Marvel versus DC, it's like, go see everything. You don't need, nobody's in a fight.
No, except for them wanting more money from us.
Well, right, they all want to make
Yeah.
your money, but they're not like, oh, I hate that project. It's, no.
Well, on Captain Marvel's, the opening to Captain Marvel's in our rear view, I'm happy that it did good numbers because I love having something to talk about on the show.
Sure.
I'm happy that there are a lot of people out there that love this film, and I'm happy that we get to move on
I think we get to
to
talk
the
about
next
something
thing.
else. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Captive State.
Captive State.
Let's talk about
How's
it.
it going to do? I'm going to have 14 charts about it next week. Thank you for watching Charting with Dan. See you next time.